Conveer, the Chief Data Officer at Privacy Dynamics. Today, I'm going to show you an approach to data minimization for data teams using dbt and Privacy Dynamics. I have here on my screen a DAG that represents a typical dbt project. This is modeling a hat shop, which has users or customers, products like different types of hats, and then orders, which are composed of order items, which link to products. Now my users table, of course, is full of PII, as it typically would be. So I can see here that I have, say, the names of my customers, their email addresses, maybe a Stripe token, their mailing address, phone number, and I even have like their head size and gender, which are useful when selling someone hats. Oh, and of course their birthday. Now, I would like to kind of model this data into a completed orders fact table and a user's dimension table. And so for that, I'm going to use dbt. Now, this dbt project I've constructed has these models I've shown you. We also, of course, have tests on those models. For example, not null and relationships tests between the different tables. I can run that model and see that it builds. So when I run dbt build, this is kind of my development environment here, and I'm going to be building a set of those models into a new database in Snowflake called dev tconveer. Now that data is coming from a database called raw. That's where I've chosen to kind of load in this raw data. And so you can see that as I run dbt, it's transforming the data, creating new tables in that dev tconveer schema or database, excuse me, and then running tests on those new tables. And in just a second, we'll see that all of those models build and the tests pass. And of course they do, because this is a happy little dbt project that I've constructed here. Now, I can go into Snowflake and kind of verify that this data in my development environment is what I expect it to be. So I'm going to run a query against that staging app users table. Okay, and what I see here is that the data transformation is doing exactly what I want. But I also see, and this is pretty exciting, but Beyonce is a customer of my hat shop. Oh my goodness. And look at this. I see her email address and her phone number, and oh my gosh, Beyonce has a huge head. Whoever would have known? So of course this is just an example hat shop and a totally made up example, but this is a type of accidental data disclosure which kind of underscores why data minimization is so important. This happens very frequently as data teams try to work with real data as they do their work. As I develop my dbt project, I shouldn't need access to customers' PII, but unfortunately for most teams, it's very hard to strip that kind of data out of the development environment while preserving all of the richness and edge cases that's present in production data. So what we see all the time are data teams who, by no fault of their own, and honestly as kind of standard practice, are running development workflows on top of production data that includes PII. So how do we solve this problem? What we're going to do today, as the rest of this demo, is set up a new workflow that uses dbt with Privacy Dynamics. So what we'll do is, this is kind of a diagram of my whole sort of computing environment here for my data team. And I have these several sources, including my application database that we were just looking at. Those are being loaded into the raw database inside of Snowflake. And what we'll do is Privacy Dynamics will replicate that data from the raw database to a new database that we're going to call raw safe. And while it's doing that replication, we're going to be detecting PII and anonymizing those records. So not just stripping out direct identifiers like name, email address, and phone number, but also anonymizing any quasi-identifiers. And those are things like age or birth date with gender and zip code that can collectively re-identify individuals. Then we'll be running our development workflows in DBT off of that raw safe database instead of the raw database. But production can still select from the raw database if we'd like. So coming back to my demo here, if I go back into VS Code, or excuse me, before I do that, I need to set up privacy dynamics. And so all we have to do here is create, this is the privacy dynamics SaaS application. And we can deploy this in the cloud as a SaaS, or also inside your VPC using Kubernetes if you would like that option as well. But once you're in the app, you just have to create a new connection to your data warehouse. And I've already created those connections here. So one for my raw database in Snowflake and one for this raw safe database here. Once I've done that, anonymizing my data is as simple as selecting from my source schema, or my origin here. And I'm going to choose to save the anonymized data to a new database. And this can be, in Snowflake, databases are just kind of logical concepts and you can query across databases, but this works even for other databases or other types of data connectors that don't allow you to query between databases. So I'm going to save this to my raw safe database, and I'm going to add a new schema called app. Now, we want to make this as easy for teams as possible, so configuration to get started is pretty minimal. I'm going to choose to treat or anonymize my users table and also my orders table because orders contain some addresses. But I happen to know that order items and products are safe and don't contain any PII, so I'm going to go ahead and just pass those through. And what I mean there is we'll replicate that data from the raw database to the raw safe database without making any changes to it whatsoever. But that way we have a schema preserving copy of our raw data in that raw safe database, which is exactly what we're going to need for our DBT development environment. Now, once I've selected which tables I want to treat, I click Next. And I'm going to choose here to get started with the default options. I could spend a few more minutes setting up and customizing or fine-tuning my data, but we'll see in just a minute. I can also go back and edit a project once the defaults have been applied. So we're going to just start with the default data for now. I'm going to choose to treat direct identifiers, which are things like name, addresses, and social security numbers, by replacing them with fake data that looks realistic. And for my indirect identifiers, I'm going to choose to anonymize those or perturb them. Pretty soon we'll have an option here to just skip that part if you don't want to treat your data in that way. On the next screen, I give my project a name. And I can choose to set up a schedule. I can set up any schedule I'd like, either using this UI or typing in a cron tab here. So I'll choose to set up a daily schedule. And I will also choose to check this box that says automatically create new data sets. And that means that every time Privacy Dynamics runs, if it detects a new table in my source schema, it will automatically anonymize that table and replicate it into my destination schema with the default configuration. Now I'll click Finish. And that's really it. That's all that it takes to get started with Privacy Dynamics. Right now the app is running on my data. It's analyzing it. We actually simulate an attack on the data to try to re-identify individuals in that data. And then we perform several transformations to the data in order to anonymize it. Let me move this here so it's out of the way. So you'll see here, we replicated those 4 tables already. It only took a few seconds. And I have here a summary report of the risk that is present in the replicated data. And you can see we were able to strip out almost all of the risk of re-identification by treating this data. Now I'm going to click into each data set here. And this shows a more detailed report of all of the transformations that were done to the data. So we can see, for example, that we actually treated 100% of the rows in my users table. This is users here that I'm looking at. But we only had to treat about 20% of the cells because only some of the cells contain PII. We can also see on the left-hand side here, each of these cards is a column in my users table, and we can see the classification that was automatically applied to each column. So for example, we see that there's a full name column in the data set. We've detected that that is a full name and therefore it's PII, and we've replaced that with fake data here. You can see the same is true for email, the mailing address, phone number. Now things like head size, gender, and birth date are not direct identifiers, those are quasi-identifiers. So head size is a generic category, and then gender and birth date. And those things collectively could be used to re-identify individuals in my data set, maybe if I had an external data set to link this with. And so what we've done in this case is perturb some values for head size and gender where necessary to create kind of unique combinations of those traits in our users table. Now I'm going to fine-tune the handling of my data here by editing the data set, and I can choose exactly how I want to treat specific columns if I'd like. So for example, the ID column is quite important to me. I'm going to choose to lock that so that that doesn't become part of the anonymization treatment, and that we maintain referential integrity between our different tables here. I'm also going to change this address field from a US address to a US address full. So I want to include the state and zip code in that as well when we generate the fake data. And now I'm going to save my data set settings here and rerun that data, or rerun that anonymization. I'll do that one more time with the orders data, just to make sure that we have everything exactly the way we want it. So if I look into orders, I see again that the address was correctly classified as PII, but I'm going to edit that treatment again, and this time I'm going to make sure that we lock the status field. I happen to know that there's nothing kind of identifiable about status, so I'm going to lock that out so that our anonymizer doesn't treat the status column. I'll also lock the ID just to be safe, although that's already the default setting that's been applied here. So we'll rerun that. Again, it just takes a few seconds. And now if I come back into my DBT project, now the only change I need to make is instead of building my development models off of raw, I'm going to make a single change to the code here, and I'm going to replace that with this Jinja statement, which says that the database for this app source should be raw if the target name is prod, so if we're running this in production, else build against the raw safe database. So this will by default use the raw safe or the anonymized data that we just created, but if we're running in prod, it'll still build off of raw. One way that I could kind of operationalize this is by creating different roles for developers, or like maybe my analytics engineers or whoever's developing a DBT project versus the production run of DBT. And the developers could maybe only have access to the raw safe database, but the production run, or maybe a CI run, could additionally have access to the raw data if we would like to actually build our production analytics off of the raw or untreated data. So I'll save that change. And now I'm going to run dbt build one more time. And so what we expect to happen here is to build essentially exactly the same project, right? This is the huge benefit of anonymized data over a solution like synthetic data, or using small kind of manufactured data sets, which is that I'm still running this project against all of my data. There's still all of the edge cases and all of the strange kind of gotchas that I might find in my production data. I just am doing this now in a way that is respecting my customers' privacy. But this will go through, and we'll rebuild all of those models. We'll even see that the relationships test pass, because of course I'm building this on my data, and that's really what's so powerful about this approach. And you'll see the project is pretty much completed here. Now, if I come back to my query before, right? Before this was selecting from the raw database, we saw Beyonce here, right? Our customer 1501. But now if I kind of rerun this query, again, fetching from my development environment, you see that customer 1501 has been replaced with a fake name. We've masked their Stripe ID. They have a fake email address. And so, as well as phone number and the other PII. And so, I can similarly inspect this. I still get the same value that I would out of my production data when developing in DBT. But now we've completely minimized the exposure or the potential for accidental disclosure with PII as part of DBT development. So just to recap here, what we did in the demo is we made a safe or anonymized copy of our raw database into raw safe, and we pointed and we changed the configuration in DBT so that our development runs in DBT point to that raw safe database, but our production runs can still kind of build off of raw. So thank you so much for watching this demo. If you would like to get started with Privacy Dynamics, you can sign up today at privacydynamics.io. And if you'd like to reach out or have any questions, my email is ted@privacydynamics.io, and you can also find me in the DBT Slack. All right, thank you.